Could I ask board colleagues if they have any questions on progress with CCGs and the continued progress on commissioning support? Yes.
It's sort of by way of a comment, really, rather than a question, but it's just to know, when you think about this from the sort of strategy point of view, there was a point very early on when people were imagining that we would end up with a very, very disaggregated system. People were speculating about 500 plus CCGs, many tens of support organisations, and serious concern about the ability of that system to hold together when you needed to take decisions at a large population level. And I think it's incredibly encouraging with your support and team support that when GP colleagues have been reflecting on that, they've ended up in this sort of configuration with closer to 200 fairly large populations, and even the smaller ones that I've met reflecting on the need to work together on issues beyond those populations, and a number of commissioning support bodies that can really support strategic decision making. So I think it puts the argument about the ability of these groups to think strategically as well as locally, I think, in a very helpful way.
Thank you. Bruce.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and I'd like to congratulate you and your team on a remarkable piece of work. But you mentioned that 86 CCGs would hold similar boundaries to old PCTs, and that there would be more that were coterminous with local authorities. And what I'd like to explore with you is, does this enhance stability at a time of quite difficult change, or does it curtail the freedoms of nascent CCGs, which in turn poses an opportunity cost on innovation?
Good question, thank you, Bruce.
Yes.
We've got 86 that match existing local authority boundaries, and therefore inevitably 86 that match their predecessor PCTs. And I think that where there is absolute coterminosity, or where there is congruity, then inevitably that stability will give that health economy some significant advantage. In terms of corporate memory, in terms of the close working that's gone on between the local authority and the organisation, in terms of the kind of creating of the Health and Wellbeing Board and Health Watch out of predecessor organisations. But I do think that the fact that the geography is the same by no means means that these organisations are the same. And I think our aspirations for these organisations, very much as David described earlier, is that this is a new system with clinical commissioning and clinical commissioners and individuals and systems which are much closer to patients and the public. Will actually drive change, drive innovation, as you say, and design services in a way that meets their patients' needs. So whilst there may be many local authorities and PCTs actually covered natural geographies, and actually the patients not only feel that is their home geography, that's the place where they say they live, but actually often sitting in the middle of that geography is a large hospital to which the majority of the patients flow. So I think it would have been a shame. I think we would have seen some worries that we had at the beginning. It would have been a shame if the system, for areas where that benefits to patients wasn't held through, it hadn't shone through. But I think that even under those circumstances, what we need to make sure as we support CCGs, and I know it's their determination, that these will be really different organisations where, because they're based on practices and because they're based on practitioners who see patients, hundreds of patients every day, the footfall through general practice is absolutely enormous, and the close relationships that these practices and all their constituent staff have with other independent primary care contractors and community staff, that intimate relationship with patients, which helps them to understand on a day-to-day basis what it really is that their patients want and need, coupled with the kind of population base. Many practices and practitioners remain in the same place for years and years and years. They have a real sense of community and will be able to work with local authorities on that. We're already seeing leaders of local authorities and leaders of practices working together on that sense of community. Then I think it's that heart of clinical commissioning based on the practices, but as I've said before, with the practices coordinating and involving all those who are involved, that I think is really exciting and is the potential for a difference and a way in which we can deliver services to patients which are much more tailored to their needs and the wants of the population, but as you say, are innovative and different as well.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I don't think we're getting excited enough about this, really, because it is, in my experience in the NHS, this is unique. I mean, we've never gone through this, and when we started off down this road, we genuinely didn't know how many there would be or how it would work, or even whether people would respond to it. So I think, well, this is a kind of, I genuinely believe it's a triumph of clinical leadership, really, because people have worked really hard on all of this over the last 18 months or so. They've self-organised themselves. I mean, I do think there's a big issue for us in terms of the authorisation, because one of the things I think we've learned out of all of this is that there is no right population, because for some patients it's a 10,000 population for commissioning, for others it's 56 million, and this system seems to have the ability, potentially the ability, that we need to test in authorisation to come together in bigger geographies when you need to take decisions about strategic and big services, but also be able to work at a practice level when it needs to talk about someone. That we've never had anything like that. The potential, I think, is really fantastic. And the other thing I would say, and I obviously Barbara and the team's done a great job, but existing SHA and PCT people, some of whom haven't got a future in the system, have supported and helped all of this to happen. But many of the GP leaders themselves have emerged out of all of this, and I think will contribute. But this is not just about the future, because it's actually about the present. And if you think about the CCGs last year, even the ones that were developing, we delegated about half of the budget of the NHS to them last year. And that's gone up considerably this year. So they're already contributing to the way in which services are developing. Obviously, in some areas, better than others and working hard. But, you know, the performance levels of the NHS, I think they've contributed significantly too. So I think you can see this is not we switch something on the 1st of April 2013. We can see a trajectory of work, I think, which is going to be very, very significant for the NHS.
Absolutely, and I think that there's some places where under the delegated authority as a subcommittee of the PCT, the CCGs are effectively functioning as the commissioners and the representatives of their patients already. It is varied, but we're seeing that increasingly with CCGs taking on more and more responsibilities for commissioning. And I think, you know, the excitement amongst the clinical community about the potential for this is very high. And I think that the board has said from the outset that our role is the main role of the board is to support the CCGs, as well as our direct commissioning responsibilities, to support CCGs to be the best that they absolutely can be. So, you know, I think for today we really should be celebrating a great success that they've got this far.
Good. Thank you for that. I mean, can I just ask a question in terms of what the authorisation guidance has gone out, where it is inevitably a process. But one of the things the board has said before is in going through that process, we look to support and encourage and provide advice to CCGs. Is that sort of still the mindset, and has that been well received in the community?
It is absolutely the mindset, and in fact this week we've had 2 workshops, one in the north of England and one in London for the CCGs in Wave 1, to help and support them to be the best that they can be through authorisation. And I think feedback from CCGs and the leaders of the primary care organisations who represent CCGs is that they've really welcomed the developmental nature of the authorisation process. And I think that one of the things we tried to do in the authorisation process was not simply come up with a kind of pass-fail level, but to work with CCGs to describe their aspirations. So the applicant's guide to authorisation, and we've recently put onto the website an assessor's guide to help, which starts to put some of the more technical details on for authorisation. The applicant's guide starts by describing the long-term aspiration for clinical commissioning groups to be absolutely excellent commissioners, and actually then starts to take them on this development developmental journey. The board, has a huge responsibility to make sure that they are safe. These organisations will be responsible for an enormous amount of public money and the population's health services. So the board's responsibilities will be to make sure that as they're authorised with or without conditions, they're safe to commission services. But actually, I think the feeling of excitement is that there is then a long-term journey of development which they'll go on to become better and better.
Excellent, and I think that certainly reflects the whole board's view of how that process should go. So thank you very much for that, and the board is presumably content to note progress, to see the planning assumptions inherent in the CCGs and the running costs. And I think probably right to say the board should congratulate the whole system, in addition to Barbara, of course, to getting where we've got to today, but recognising there's still some way to travel before we get to April next year. But thank you very much for that, and pass our thanks on to colleagues who are working so hard on this.